Thanks for watching ERi-TV, dear viewers. Welcome to our news broadcast. Here are the headlines. Second part of highlights of local media interview with President Afwerki. Ambassador Alam Zahaye presents credentials. Russian passenger plane crashes in the country's far east. And Thai authorities announce closure of all border points with Cambodia. Dear viewers, yesterday, 23 July, His Excellency President Afwerki gave an extensive interview to local media in which highlights of the first part of the interview was presented to you yesterday. Following, therefore, is the second part of the highlights of the interview with His Excellency President Afwerki. We'll start off with the segment regarding the Sudan. The war in the Sudan is not really a civil war or merely a confrontation between two generals. The historical backdrop of the spontaneous popular uprising that erupted in the Sudan and that led to the current preoccupying situation must be appraised fully for a contextual and informed reading of the prevailing reality. From its independence in 1956 until the National Islamic Front, the NIF, seized power through a military coup in 1989, the politics of the Sudan was much more advanced in comparative continental terms. The NIF had embedded itself in the Numeri regime as early as 1983, but it failed to achieve its objective through normal political processes. Political Islam and the fundamentalist agenda that it adopted had peripheral support within the broader population, as it did not exceed 4% in those times. This is why it resorted to a military coup in 1989. The NIF's agenda of fundamentalism created cleavages and instability not only in the Sudan but also precipitated apprehension in the wider Horn of Africa region due to the dangers posed by its messianic political Islam. We must recall that bin Laden was operating from eastern Sudan in those times. The separation of South Sudan was the undesirable outcome of the NIF's Islamist agenda. The leaders of the South Sudan movement were committed to a united and reformed Sudan that guaranteed the equal participation of all its citizens and constituencies. Separation was seen as a remote 1% probability and residual option. The NIF's Islamist agenda further stoked similar political upheavals in Abyei, Darfur, Kordofan, etc., in addition to spiraling economic crisis, despite the Sudan's enormous endowments, as it was dubbed as the food basket of Africa, all over the country in the following 2 decades. This was the backdrop of the 2019 spontaneous popular uprising. In those critical early times, we, for our part, shared our thoughts in the form of a roadmap of transition with the Sovereign Council. The general idea of the concept revolved around creating the conducive conditions to fulfill the expressed aspirations of the Sudanese people by rectifying the follies of the NIF regime and fostering appropriate institutions based on citizenship rather than religious and ethnic enclaves. To this end, the Sovereign Council would be entrusted to shoulder the responsibility of transition and hand power to a civilian government in due time. This could have been accomplished in the 3 years that have already elapsed without the complications that ensued to hamper the implementation of the desired mechanism. Unfortunately, the conflict was escalated by external powers that have long targeted the Sudan due to its crucial geopolitical importance. The UAE's leader is at the forefront in this baffling scheme, which is also intertwined with the wider and elusive agenda of controlling virtually the constellation of ports from Suez all the way down to the Gulf of Aden and as far as Tanzania. This agenda is contrary to the legacy of the UAE's founding father and great statesman. It cannot also be attributed solely to the agenda of the current leader of the UAE, as there are other powers who are behind and driving the whole scheme. Sudan's stability is vital, contributing significantly to the overall security of the region. Our modest contribution in the stabilization of the Sudan is not thus an option, but a necessity that we cannot overlook due to its ramifications. Indeed, this remains incumbent in other countries in the wider region too. On national priority development programs. Eritrea's broader development roadmap focuses on increasing productivity in the sectors of comparative advantage within a framework of concrete and quantifiable programs. For the short term, the priorities revolve around the opportunities for growth in the agricultural and marine resources sector are huge, and the potential for growth very high in terms of arable land, water infrastructure, and sustainable fisheries yields. In this context, concrete programs for implementation include expansion of catchment areas, increased production of crops, seed oil and horticulture, and expansion of irrigation systems through imported and domestically produced innovative technology. Phased implementation of devolved mini-grids for energy supply through hybrid thermal, which will increasingly be supplemented by solar sources. Implementation of residential housing projects in urban as well as rural areas, especially in those stated for projects of economic expansion. Improvements of social services, particularly in education and health. A comprehensive review of our education system from the kindergarten level to the tertiary level is underway to ensure higher standards and greater efficacy. Ensuring the quality and distribution of our health facilities also remains of paramount importance, and this will be incorporated in the short-term program of enhanced delivery of social services. Provision of social safety net to those that depend on state support while creating employment opportunities to those who are able to work. More vigorous work on the maintenance of existing national road networks to provide better transport services for movement of people and goods. More importantly, our capacity building or human resource development program remains our top priority. It is the indispensable prerequisite for realizing all the projects outlined earlier. All our projects must be carried out within a measurable framework and clear time frame of implementation. Regional administrations will take responsibility to implement the national development projects within their respective regions. Community participation is critical for the success and ownership of these programs. The defense forces will contribute in the implementation of large infrastructural programs. The diaspora can also participate in the development programs through investment in accordance with appropriate modalities. On diplomatic and media work, President Isias referred to Eritrea's roadmap of diplomacy for constructive engagement in its wider neighborhood, the Horn of Africa, Nile Basin, Red Sea, and Gulf regions. This is predicated on promoting overall stability and enhancing the common agendas of complementarity and integration. The policy goes beyond the neighborhood to foster consultation with other powers and countries that impact the region in various ways. The US, Europe, China, Russia, etc. within the wider neighborhood. Eritrea strives to canvass for greater involvement of all the countries to address critical issues of instability and conflict. Purposeful action by regional players can prevent the trend of crisis management and perpetuation by external actors. The diplomatic engagements must be predicated on good faith interactions and not futile deceptions. In this connection, President Isias again urged Ethiopia to focus on resolving its pressing internal problems instead of indulging in provocative rhetoric. President Isias emphasized the synergy and interlinked media and diplomatic tasks, both through a proactive and reactive approaches. The reactive posturing stems from relentless campaigns of defamation and demonization, while the imperative of debunking disinformation is palpable. The task includes proactive and positive information that has its impact and dividends in the diplomatic work. These tasks must be enhanced through greater interaction in social media and functional centers of strategic studies for objective narratives. Ambassador Alam Zahaya, Eritrea's ambassador to India, has presented his credentials to President Anura Kamura Disanayake of Sri Lanka as Eritrea's non-resident ambassador to the country. At the ceremony held today, 24 July, Ambassador Alam conveyed a message of goodwill from President Isaias Afwerki to President Anura Kumara Disanayake and expressed Eritrea's commitment to strengthening bilateral relations and cooperation between the two countries. President Anura Kanura Disanayake, on his part, wished Ambassador Alam a successful tenure and asked him to convey his best wishes to President Isaias Afwerki. He also emphasized the need for integrated efforts to further enhance mutual cooperation between the two countries. That was our domestic news. Please stay tuned for the international news right after the short break. A Russian passenger plane carrying 49 passengers, including 5 children and 6 crew members on board, has crashed in the country's east, leaving no survivors, local news agencies said. The local emergencies ministry said today that the AN-24 plane, operated by a Siberian-based airline called Angara, dropped off radar screens while approaching its destination of Tinda, a town in the Amur region bordering China. Russian rescuers found the fuselage of the plane in flames, and debris from the plane was located in the Amur region. Russian news agency Interfax reported. According to Russia's TASS news agency, poor visibility due to extreme weather conditions is possible reason for the crash. Thai authorities today announced the closure of all border points with Cambodia after weeks of tension over a border dispute escalated into clashes that have killed at least 9 civilians. Following an incident yesterday where 5 Royal Thai Army personnel stepped on a landmine in the Chong An Ma area, Thailand escalated the security measures along the border from 2 level, which only restricts the crossing borders of the people and the period of time that they can cross, to level 4, which involves the complete closure of all border checkpoints along the Thai-Cambodian border. For more than a century, Thailand and Cambodia have contested sovereignty at various undemarcated points along their 817 kilometers land border, which has led to skirmishes over several years and at least a dozen deaths, including during a week-long exchange of artillery in 2011. Tensions were reignited in May this year following the killing of a Cambodian soldier during a brief exchange of gunfire, which escalated into a full-blown diplomatic crisis and now has triggered armed clashes. Please stay tuned for a recap of tonight's headlines. Second part of highlights of local media interview with His Excellency President Isaias Afwerki. Ambassador Alam Zahaya presents credentials. Russian passenger plane crashes in the country's far east. And Thai authorities announce closure of all border points with Cambodia. And that was our news for tonight, dear viewers. It is good night from us.